For those Americans who perhaps took a moment this past Christmas Day to catch up with what was going on in the world, they no doubt saw this story on that day. A Christmas morning house fire. It happened in Connecticut. It had taken the lives of one woman's entire family, her 3 little girls and her parents. We later learned the woman's name, Madonna Badger. Everyone who saw the story or saw coverage of that awful funeral wondered how this woman kept on going. Tonight we meet her and we hear her story. Madonna Badger agreed to sit down with Matt Lauer and talk about the Christmas tragedy that remains so achingly sad.
Can you envision the word healing being appropriate in your life at some point?
I mean, I think healing is the only word. I'm a raw nerve, basically. Obviously after 6 months, you hope to grow the slightest bit of skin over the nerve. I mean, getting well, I don't know, that sounds insane, but I don't know. I think healing is the only word you can use.
How do you heal from what Madonna Badger has endured? How do you make sense of a Christmas morning fire that kills all 3 of your children and both of your parents?
I remembered when, ever I had heard stories like that, I had always said, how did those people live through that? There's no way I could not live through that.
Madonna Badger's life changed forever last Christmas Eve. Her family was celebrating together, parents Lomer and Pauline Johnson, and her 3 little girls, 7-year-old twins Grace and Sarah, and 9-year-old Lily. Her dad was finishing up his job as a department store Santa, while her mom played with the girls.
One of the things that Lily and Sarah and Grace and my mom did is they all went to their rooms and they hung up paintings and pictures all over their rooms, all over their walls.
The walls of their new home, a waterfront Victorian house in Stamford, Connecticut. Badger moved there last fall with her girls. She and her husband Matthew had been separated 3 years, but remained good friends.
What floor was your bedroom on?
My bedroom was on the 2nd floor in the front of the house. And on the 3rd floor were 3 little bedrooms. And those 3 bedrooms was all pink and white and...
Perfect little girls' rooms.
That's what I thought.
The house was being renovated by Badger's longtime friend, contractor Michael Borsina. Recently, the two had become romantically involved. This would be the family's first Christmas in their new, still unfinished home. Badger put her girls to bed around 9 p.m.
And so I laid down with them and just chatted and talked and, told them I loved them.
With the girls tucked in, Badger and Borsina spent the next several hours wrapping presents. Just before they headed to bed around 3:30 a.m., they noticed some ashes on the hearth in the front of the fireplace. The last log had been placed on the fire 6 or 7 hours earlier.
Mike started cleaning up those ashes on the hearth, put them in a brown bag that was like a shopping bag, like a fancy craft paper bag. I watched him take them with his hand, the shovel, and put them into the bag, and then I watched him put his hands in the bag.
So he's putting his hands in the bag now to feel.
To make sure that there's nothing on fire in the bag. I mean, if you're going to clean up something like that, you better make damn sure that there's no fire going on.
So the ashes in that brown bag were then placed where?
They were placed on top of one of the plastic bins that we had brought in. And that bin was then placed in the mudroom.
On her way to bed, Badger glanced one more time at the bag of ashes in the mudroom.
And I remember thinking to myself, I should put that outside. I should put that outside. And then I remember thinking, no, but I watched him put his hands through it. I watched him wash his hands with the black and the ashes.
So you thought there was no danger?
No danger.
No danger, a phrase her father had lived by forever and had taught her.
We used to call my dad Mr. Safety Man. He changed the batteries in my fire alarms, every year for me.
This house was no exception, as this photo shows Badger placed fire extinguishers in the halls and battery-operated smoke detectors in the rooms, which Badger says had been tested.
I woke up and I was choking. And I couldn't breathe, choking. And I realized there was a fire.
Did you hear smoke detectors? Did you hear
No.
smoke alarms?
No.
Anything going off in that house?
Nothing. It was silent. It was the scariest silence.
So you got out through the window.
I got out through the window. I ran to the edge of my house, and I looked down to the left. And there I saw a little bit of flame, but mostly just sparks everywhere.
Coming out of
Smoke.
what?
It was near where the electricity goes into the house, where the meter is. So that location is also very close to the mudroom. And so I had to make a decision, because the windows there were my mom and dad's windows. So I had to decide, do I go in and save them, or do I go save my children? And so I ran the other way to save my children. So I scrambled up the scaffolding to get to Grace's window. And I opened that window, and the smoke that hit me, it was just the blackest, like an ocean. And it was twirling, and there was embers and all kinds of stuff in it. And I kept trying to hold my breath and put my head in. And I did that like 3 or 4 times, and I couldn't get in. I couldn't get in the window.
When you opened the window, did you get a glimpse of any of your girls?
No, it was so black. It was the blackest smoke I've ever seen. No. If I could have seen them, I would have gone in. I mean, it's impossible to describe how it is that you can't go in and save your own children, but I couldn't get through that smoke. I couldn't. I couldn't. I knew I would die. And I also remember thinking that I had to stay alive because no one else was there to tell them where they were. If the firemen came, to tell them where to go and look for them and save them.
This video from a neighbor's cell phone captures the intensity of the fire and the impossible task facing Madonna Badger.
And I finally went down, and I thought maybe I would see them, that they were just in the backyard, with my mom and dad, but they weren't.
6 months after Madonna Badger lost her family when her home burned down on Christmas morning, it is still obviously, understandably, so raw for her. It will be for the rest of her days, including, we should note, her anger over her lingering questions about the investigation into that house fire. Here now, part 2 of her conversation with Matt Lauer.
Early on Christmas morning, a few hours after Madonna Badger was brought to the emergency room, she finally learned the terrible truth.
Who told you?
The doctor that was on duty. It was a brand new doctor, and she took Mike's hand and she took my hand and put them together, and she said, and she held them, and she said, "Your 3 children are gone, and probably your mom and dad, but we don't know that for certain." And then, oh my God, I couldn't believe it.
Badger spent days in the hospital overcome with grief. Only later did she learn that just a day after the fire, her house had been demolished. All that was left was a vacant lot.
After the funeral, I had an interview with the police. And the first question they asked me was, "Why did you have your house torn down?"
And you said?
I said, "I didn't have my house torn down. What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, we were told that you had your house torn down." It's like, no. And then I asked them if they could help me get anything out of the house, that I wanted to know where my things were, that were in the house that might have,
And salvageable.
And they said, we'll find out. And so within a 3 or 4 day period, they brought a bag of stuffed animals, black contractor bag of stuffed animals.
That was it.
And that was it.
The state's attorney concluded the fire was most likely caused by the disposal of fireplace ash, a theory Badger had hysterically blurted out to a fire official the morning of the blaze.
Do you think that became the entirety of the investigation? Do you think they just said, okay, it was those ashes?
What do you think?
You think it could have been something else?
Yes.
And yet, once the house was torn down and the demolition occurred, you really don't have any way to carry on your own investigation into that.
No. There was no inventory done of my house. They've given me no inventory. The house was torn down. They've taken everything, and they don't know where it is.
So even what they demolished and took away, they can't tell you where they took it?
No, they won't tell me. I've asked them. They didn't keep anything forensically out of my house. Not one fire alarm, not a smoke alarm, not an electrical panel, not the electric meter itself.
When you consider
nothing.
that 5 people died in that building, you think that's odd?
I think from everything that everyone has told me, it's very odd. I think it's a crime.
This is one of the questions that nags you, and that is, why was that house torn down so quickly? Was the investigation thorough?
Investigating fires is very serious business. All of my family members died, 5 people. How is that not considered a crime scene? I want to know not only what caused my fire, I want to know why didn't the fire alarms go off? The hardwired alarms had batteries in them. Why didn't those go off? How is it that they don't save those alarms? Because alarms can be tested after the fact. That's what you do in a fire investigation.
Madonna Badger says she still doesn't know who ordered the demolition. She's filed a legal notice that will allow her to sue the city of Stamford.
I don't believe that the ashes caused the fire. It just doesn't seem like a plausible explanation.
She says she simply wants answers.
Those questions that are unanswered, those questions you've told me about, is it imperative for you to answer those questions for Lily, Grace, and Sarah, and your parents?
Absolutely. To honor them with the truth. I believe they deserve that.
And if the truth is that a bag filled with some ashes from a fireplace set their house on fire, that's okay too, in terms of an answer?
I mean, absolutely. I have to live with them being gone every single day. The cause of that fire is important for me to know in order to somehow find some peace.
Less than 2 weeks after the tragedy, Madonna Badger delivered a touching eulogy for her 3 little girls.
What you wrote about them was beautiful. I have 3 children, and as I listened to you describe your girls, I think every parent could see some of his or her children in your descriptions.
My girls are in my heart. They're right here. And this is where they live now.
You speak in the present with your daughters and your mom and your dad. Consciously or subconsciously?
Definitely subconsciously, sometimes consciously.
Why consciously?
Because I feel them. They're with me. They're not here physically, but I feel them. They're my children. They're my mom and dad.
Think you'll always feel that way?
I hope so.
So when you ask how someone in that circumstance goes on, there's your answer. A fund has been established in honor of those three little girls, Lily, Sarah, and Grace. It will support the arts in public elementary schools. There's information about it on our website. While we note this has been extraordinarily tough on those firefighters who responded to that fire that night, we should also note, as a legal matter, the city of Stamford, Connecticut has declined to address the specific questions raised by Madonna Badger.